The thing you have to understand is that it's never about the noise itself. It's about the silence that follows. The thump from the attic isn't what stops your heart. It's the breath you hold afterward, the straining of your ears in the sudden, profound quiet, waiting for the confirmation that you're not crazy, that something is, in fact, up there with you. My story, the one that scraped the sanity from my bones and left me a hollowed-out shell listening for creaks in the night, didn't start with a bang or a crash. It started with a simple geometric aberration, a single perfect square. We'd just moved into the house on Hemlock Way, a classic colonial, white with black shutters, at the end of a cul-de-sac where the streetlights were few and far between. It was more house than we could afford, a stretch for my salary as a mid-level graphic designer. But Sarah had fallen in love with the weeping willow in the backyard and the way the morning light hit the kitchen island. Our son Leo, who was 7 at the time, was thrilled to have a staircase to slide down and a vast, unfinished basement he declared his robot laboratory. It felt like a new beginning, a page torn from a catalog of suburban dreams. The first week was all cardboard boxes, the smell of fresh paint, and the echo of our voices in empty rooms. The oddity, that first little splinter in our reality, presented itself on a Tuesday. I was the last one to bed, doing my final rounds, checking the locks on the doors, turning off the lights. As I passed the front door, my hand on the deadbolt, I glanced down at the small stack of mail on the console table. Sitting on top, pristine and white, was a square envelope, not a rectangle like every other bill or catalog. A perfect, unnerving square. There was no stamp, no return address. Just our names, the Millers, written in a handwriting that was too precise, almost like a font. The ink a flat matte black. "Sarah, did you get mail today?" I called up the stairs. "Just the usual junk." Her voice floated down, muffled by sleep. "Why?" "Nothing," I said, pocketing the envelope. I didn't want to worry her. It was probably a welcome card from a neighbor, a bit oddly shaped, but friendly. I took it to my small home office, the room still smelling of sawdust from the recently built shelves. I slid my finger under the flap. The paper was thick, expensive. Inside was a single, glossy black and white photograph. It was a picture of our house taken from the street, but it was wrong. The willow tree in the yard was a sapling, not the gnarled giant it was now. Our cars weren't in the driveway. The photo was dated, you could just make it out, scratched into the bottom border in that same precise handwriting. October 31st, 1987. A chill, thin and sharp as a razor blade, traced my spine. A prank, I told myself. A weird historical photo from the previous owners. But why deliver it like this, in the dead of night with no postmark? I shoved the photo back in the envelope and tossed it in the desk drawer, deciding to forget about it. A decision I would come to replay in my mind 1,000 times. A turning point where I could have chosen vigilance, but instead chose comfort. The next few days were normal. Leo built his robots, Sarah planted flowers, and I hung pictures on the walls. Then the noises began. Not the groans and settles of an old house. I was prepared for those. This was different. It was a soft, rhythmic scratching, like a pet wanting to be let in. It would start somewhere near the back door. Then, a minute later, it would seem to come from the wall behind our bed. We had no pets. One night, it was directly above our heads in the attic. A slow, deliberate scrape. Drag, pause. Scrape, drag, pause. "Okay, that's it," Sarah said, her voice tight. "It's a raccoon. Or a squirrel. You have to go up there, Mark." I didn't want to. The thought of pushing open that hatch and climbing into the dark, cramped space made my skin crawl. But I was the man of the house. I got the flashlight, unfolded the ladder, and with a heart hammering against my ribs, I pushed the square of drywall up and swung the beam into the darkness. The air was thick and hot, smelling of dust and old insulation. The flashlight cut a wobbly path through the gloom, illuminating the silver foil-wrapped ducks and the pink, fluffy bats of fiberglass. I scanned the space, expecting to see glowing eyes, a nest of twigs and leaves, something. There was nothing. The floor was a landscape of dust, completely undisturbed. No footprints, no droppings, no signs of life at all. Just one thing sitting directly beneath the main roof beam in the very center of the attic. A child's toy. A small wooden robot, crudely made with mismatched buttons for eyes. One of Leo's. My blood ran cold. I'd helped him look for that robot for an hour 2 days ago. He'd been distraught, certain he'd left it in the basement. How had it gotten all the way up here? And why was it placed so deliberately, like an offering on an altar? I climbed down, my hands trembling, and showed Sarah. It was Leo's. He must have taken it up there. She looked at me, her face pale. Mark, he's been too scared to even go near the attic ladder since we moved in. He wouldn't. We stood in the hallway, the silence pressing in on us. That was the second splinter. The first true crack in the foundation of our new life. The incidents escalated, each one meticulously designed to erode our sense of security. The locks on the doors would be found unlocked in the morning, even though I was fanatical about checking them. We'd wake up to find every cabinet door in the kitchen standing wide open. One afternoon, I found Leo sitting on the floor of his room, having a conversation with his reflection in the darkened screen of his tablet. He says his name is the Quiet Man, Leo told me cheerfully. He lives in the walls. He doesn't like it when we're loud. Sarah and I tried to rationalize it. Sleepwalking, stress from the move, an overactive imagination. But the rationalizations were becoming flimsier. A thin sheet of ice over a black freezing lake. The second envelope came a week later. Same square shape, same precise handwriting. This time, the photograph was of our living room. Our living room taken from the hallway. The furniture was ours, the rug we'd bought together, the throw pillows Sarah loved. And in the corner of the frame, blurred slightly as if moving, was Leo in his dinosaur pajamas, watching television. The photograph was dated the previous night. A scream caught in my throat, a silent, strangled thing. This wasn't a historical curiosity. This was a live feed. Someone was inside our house. I called the police. 2 officers came, polite, skeptical. They took a report, walked through the house, found no signs of forced entry. They checked the locks, the windows. "Everything's secure, sir," the older one said. His tone implying what he didn't say, "You're being paranoid." "It's a prank. They suggested we get a security system." We did. The very next day, a crew came and installed sensors on every door and window, a keypad by the front door, and 2 small cameras, one facing the driveway, one in the backyard. For 3 nights we slept. The house was silent. The only chime from the system, its reassuring beep as we armed it for the night. We started to breathe again. On the 4th night, the alarm screamed. It was 2:17 a.m., a shrieking, brain-liquefying sound that tore us from sleep. The panel by the door was flashing. Basement motion. My heart was a wild animal trying to escape my chest. I grabbed the baseball bat from beside the bed, my hands slick with sweat. The police were on their way. The monitoring station had called to confirm. But they were minutes out. Minutes that felt like lifetimes. "Stay here." "Lock the door!" I hissed at Sarah, who was clutching a terrified Leo. I crept down the stairs, the bat held high, my every sense screaming. The house was dark, the alarm still blaring, a soundtrack of pure panic. I reached the basement door. It was closed. I'd closed it before bed like I always did. I turned the knob, pushed it open, and flicked on the light. The basement was a long, rectangular space unfinished, with a concrete floor and exposed joists overhead. Leo's robot lab was a mess of wires and parts on a folding table. The washer and dryer hummed in the corner, and there in the very center of the concrete floor was the source of the motion. It was another toy, a stuffed bear, one of Leo's favorites. It was sitting upright, its glassy eyes staring at the stairs, at me. Propped against its chest was a small, square piece of white cardstock. On it, in that now familiar, hateful handwriting, was a single word. "Bo." The police found nothing, of course. The basement windows were all locked from the inside, small and painted shut for decades. The only door was the one I'd come through. They left with barely concealed annoyance. The alarm technician came the next day, checked the motion sensor, and declared it in perfect working order. He had no explanation. That was the night the true horror began. The Quiet Man was done with hints. He was done with games. He was announcing his presence. It started with the whispers. Not from the walls, not from the vents. They seemed to come from just behind your head, a soft, sibilant breath of sound that evaporated the moment you turned around. They were just fragments, nonsense words, or sometimes just our names, spoken in a dry, rustling tone. "Mark, Sarah, Lo." We stopped sleeping. We moved our mattress into Leo's room. The three of us huddled together on the floor. We took shifts watching the door, a kitchen knife in hand. The house was no longer our home. It was a cage, and we were sharing it with something that knew every board, every nail, every secret passage in its bones. The third envelope was waiting for me on my office chair one morning. I hadn't slept. I was running on pure frayed nerve adrenaline. My hands shook so badly I could barely tear it open. This photograph was different. It was a close-up, an extreme close-up, of a human eye. The pupil was dilated wide with fear. I could see the reflection in the cornea, a distorted, fisheye view of a room. It took me a moment to recognize it. It was Leo's room, and reflected in that terrified eye was the three of us, huddled on the mattress on the floor. The photograph was dated last night. He had been in the room with us. He had been close enough to take a picture of one of our eyes, and we never saw him, never heard him. I fell to my knees, a sob of pure, undiluted terror ripping from my throat. This was beyond burglary, beyond stalking. This was a supernatural violation, a haunting of a different, more intimate kind. The quiet man wasn't just in our house. He was in our space, our privacy, our very sight. That's when I remembered the cameras. The security system had cameras. In our panic, we'd forgotten to check the footage from the night the alarm went off. I stumbled to my computer, logging into the system with clumsy fingers. The footage from the driveway camera was uneventful. The backyard camera showed nothing but the swaying shadows of the willow tree. But there was a third option I hadn't noticed before. Internal camera. My blood turned to ice water. We didn't have an internal camera. The technician never mentioned it. With a trembling click, I opened the feed. It was a live view of my office, from a high angle, looking down at my desk, at my computer, at me. The camera was hidden somewhere in the smoke detector. I watched myself on the screen, watching myself, an infinite, horrifying recursion. I scrambled through the menu, finding the archived footage. I selected the night of the basement alarm. The timestamp in the corner read 2:17 a.m. The view was of our bedroom. It was empty, the bedclothes tangled. The camera must have been motion-activated, because it panned slowly, silently across the room. It stopped at the closet door. The door was slightly ajar, and in the crack of darkness, I could just make it out. A single human eye staring directly into the lens. It held for a 10-second eternity, then the door slid shut and the camera went dark. He had been in our closet. While we were huddled in Leo's room, he had been hiding in our bedroom closet, watching us through the camera he had installed. The final piece of the nightmare clicked into place. The square envelopes, the perfect handwriting, it wasn't just a style. It was a signature. The quiet man, he didn't live in the walls. He lived in the spaces between the pixels, in the blind spots of our perception, in the silence after the noise. He was a master of stealth, of psychological warfare, and he had been one step ahead of us from the very beginning. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't wait for the police. I couldn't rely on alarms. This was between him and me now. I waited until Sarah and Leo fell into a fitful sleep that afternoon. I took the knife and I started to search, not for a man, but for his nest, his point of origin. I went back to the attic. This time I didn't just look at the floor. I examined the walls, the rafters, the insulation. In the farthest, darkest corner behind a thick bundle of wiring, I found it. A section of the fiberglass insulation had been cut away, neatly, precisely. Behind it, the wooden slats of the wall had been pried loose. There was a hole, just large enough for a slender person to slip through. A hidden passage into the interstitial space between the walls of our house. I shone the flashlight into the darkness. It wasn't just an empty space. It was a lair. The floor of the crawl space was covered with a piece of old carpet. There was a battery-powered lantern, a bottle of water, and a small stack of square white envelopes. And there, pinned to a stud, was a gallery of photographs. Pictures of us sleeping, pictures of Sarah cooking, pictures of Leo playing. And in the center of them all, a single, final square photograph. It was a self-portrait. A man, pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes and a lipless slit of a mouth, stared blankly into the lens. He was holding the camera at arm's length, and behind him, blurred and unaware, were the three of us sitting on the couch in our old apartment. 6 months before we even knew this house existed, he hadn't followed us here. He had been waiting for us. I heard a soft shuffling sound below me. In the house, my blood froze. I had left Sarah and Leo asleep. I scrambled back through the attic. my heart trying to punch its way out of my chest. I half fell down the ladder, ignoring the rungs, and burst out into the hallway. The house was silent. Too silent. The alarm panel by the front door was dark, dead. He had cut the power. "Sarah!" I screamed, running for Leo's room. The door was closed. I threw it open. The room was empty. The mattress was there, the blankets rumpled, but they were gone. A soft whisper right behind my ear. "They're with me now." I spun around, slashing wildly with the knife, but there was only empty air. The whisper seemed to come from the walls, from the floor, from inside my own head. And then from the basement I heard it, a sound that will haunt me until the day I die. Not a scream. Not a cry for help. It was Leo's voice, small and confused. "Daddy?" he said. "The quiet man says it's time to play a new game." I ran. I flew down the stairs through the dark living room and yanked open the basement door. The light was on down there. The single bare bulb that hung from the ceiling was swinging, casting long dancing shadows. Sarah and Leo were standing in the middle of the room side by side. They were perfectly still, their eyes wide and unblinking, staring at nothing. And standing behind them, one pale, bony hand on each of their shoulders, was the man from the photograph. The quiet man. He was taller than I expected, and thinner, almost emaciated, dressed in dark, form-fitting clothes that seemed to drink the light. He didn't smile. He just looked at me, his head tilted to the side as if I were a curious specimen. "Let them go!" I choked out, the knife feeling useless and small in my hand. He didn't speak. He just shook his head slowly, almost sadly. Then he took a step back, pulling Sarah and Leo with him, melting into the deep shadow behind the furnace. The shadows seemed to swallow them whole. I lunged forward, but my feet got tangled in something on the floor. I fell hard, the knife skittering away into the darkness. I looked down at what had tripped me. It was a pile of Leo's robot parts, and arranged in the middle of the concrete, using wires and screws and bits of plastic, was a single final message, spelled out in that same precise, horrifyingly familiar handwriting. Game over. The police found me there, babbling and incoherent, clawing at the concrete floor. They never found Sarah. They never found Leo. There were no hidden doors in the basement, no secret passages. The hole in the attic was just a hole, they said, probably for old wiring. The photographs, the envelopes, the camera in the smoke. Detector. It was all gone. Vanished. They concluded that my family had left me, that the stress of the move and of failing marriage had caused me to have a psychotic break. They built a rational, comfortable narrative to explain away the irrational, comfortless truth. I live in a small apartment now on the 15th floor. I have no pictures on the walls. My mail is all digital. Every noise is the building settling. Every shadow is just a shadow. I tell myself that every hour of every day. But sometimes, late at night, when the city is quiet, I'll be on the verge of sleep and my phone will chime. A notification, and I'll look. My heart frozen in my chest, and I'll see it. A new email from an unknown sender. The subject line is always a single perfect square. And I know with a certainty that drains the warmth from my soul that the quiet man doesn't just live in houses. He lives in the silence. And he's never really gone. He's just waiting for the game to start again.